And we're on. All right. Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm going to share my screen. I'll present. All right. So, loading. Here we go. So welcome to the Design Research 101 session. We are having a hackathon this week with our friends at Terra and DeFi Labs. And we are really excited to talk to you about design and how that can help you over the course of the hackathon and hopefully just generally as you build product beyond. So, yay. Welcome. We're really excited. We're going to do a quick warm-up. So to get you involved, this is not just going to be me talking at you, which is boring. Draw a logo of your project. So if your project barely exists, that's cool, make it up. But grab a piece of paper and take 1 minute and just draw a logo for your project over the hackathon. Sound good?
Let's do it.
And don't be shy if you can't draw. I cannot draw either, but it'll be fun anyways.
You keeping time, Joe?
Yeah, I'm keeping track.
Cool.
All right, 10 more seconds. I'm actually going to stop my screen share for 1 second. Oops. All right, so does everybody have a drawing of their logo?
I'm really bad at drawing, but yes.
Yeah, me too. It's all good. A lot of people are off camera. If you want to stay off camera, that's totally fine. But it's kind of fun for everybody to turn their cameras on and hold up the logo. So I'll do that here, and then.
Oh no, I need a better pen.
Love crypto. Nice. I like Ramon's. It's like a network and a molecule all at the same time. Apollo.
Oh, 1 second, I have
Alloy,
to
that's
redraw
cool.
quickly.
Edgar's finishing up.
Mike, the pattern matching is killing it for you.
Yeah, you're gonna have to see my basement again. Sorry, guys.
That's all good, man.
Yeah, so here's our logo.
The secret, if you've got virtual backgrounds, is put it in front of your face. Apollo.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thank you for indulging me in that. We like to start these virtual sessions with something to get the juices flowing. I will go back to sharing screens. Where'd it go? Oh boy. I somehow lost my window. Hang on 1 sec. There we go. right. Boop. That's the wrong one. This is, sorry about that.
On the fly.
Yeah. That's the toolkit that I'll share in a minute. Did I close it when I?
Was trying to hide all his R-rated YouTube videos.
All right, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. My kids are on Zoom school, so my Wi-Fi network has been so slow lately. All right. Please load. Hey, Gav, if this gets stuck, we might need you to share your screen.
Yeah, no problem. Here, I'll queuing it up on this end right now.
Cool.
All right, I'm good on my end if you want.
Yeah, can you share the slides and I'll talk through them?
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
good. All good.
I have a computer. My computer's from 2013 and my Wi-Fi is maxed out right now.
And we just moved and I am sitting in a rural internet connection right now. So we'll see how this goes.
Okay.
I can help. I'm in London with good connection. So
All right.
I got backup.
Thanks, Paris. All right. So really quick, can you go to the next slide? Just we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Joe, Managing Director, IDEO Colab Ventures. Gavin, do you want to quickly say hi?
Yes, let me unmute myself. Hi, I'm Gavin, IDEO Colab Ventures.
Ramon.
Hey everyone, I'm Ramon. I'm officially part of normal IDEO, but always excited to help out Web3 projects and like diving into the Terra ecosystem.
Ramon's an interaction designer and deep in the Terra world right now. Next slide. Paris.
Hey guys, I'm Paris. I'm the newest partner at IDEO. Happy to be here. This is, I think, my first day. So super exciting. Super exciting start to it.
And last but not least, Perrin.
Definitely not least. And you spelled my name wrong, Joe. Sorry.
Of course I did.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm Perrin, IDEO, ex-IDEOer, current IDEOer, everything else in between. So this overall design expert, self-proclaimed, of course. So glad to be here.
Perrin does a lot of brand and visual design as well as interaction stuff. All right, next slide. So this is what we're going to do. We're a little bit behind because of some of the tech difficulties, but we're going to mostly try to spend time doing AMA and answering your questions about designing in crypto, designing on Terra. But I'm going to give a really quick talk on Design Research 101 just to give you a sense of what it is and why we believe in it. And then we've got a toolkit which we'll share. Edgar will share through the Event Tornado platform after this, but I'll give you an orientation of what's in the toolkit. And you can use that in the hackathon or beyond. Hopefully it's something that you find useful generally. So let's go to the next slide. All right, we've got way too much stuff for 1 hour, especially if we're trying to compress it into a half hour. So I'm just gonna go really fast, and feel free to stop us and ask questions or to hit us up on the Event Tornado platform and just ask questions or set up office hours. Next slide, so next one, yep. All right, so here's the biggest thing about the way that we think about design. Number one, it's really important. It's like value is created by designing for human needs. And that sounds so simple, but it's like really important and often gets lost in the kind of building process. So we start with people understanding what do they need. Even if you're building a platform for developers, they're still people. Even if you're building a B2B kind of thing, there's still people involved. So you want to understand what are their needs, how can you serve those needs and create value in doing so. So we talk about designing for desirability. It's like, what do people actually want and need? And then we also then start to think about feasibility, technically what's possible, viability, what's the right business model to make that sustainable. So the next slide. Why is design research really important? So on the right, you kind of see why research is important. You could design this cool cup with cute ears, and then you forget to, once you start using it, you realize that it pokes you in the eyes. And so design research is important because you want to avoid getting poked in the eyes, metaphorically, of course, when you're designing a product. You want to avoid kind of the like, oh shit, we should have thought of that, or we painted ourselves into a corner and we need to like rip out the code and start over sort of situations. So design research is the purpose is to understand unmet needs, inform kind of features and product design, and then build things that people actually want. So what it results in is it saves you time, saves you money, it saves you effort. You can make fewer, smarter pivots. You can understand where you're going. It's not just kind of like totally open-ended where you're reacting to the market constantly. You're actually proactively figuring out where do you need to go. And then you can build a community through the design process and the research process, which is really important with crypto. Next slide. So you've probably seen something like this, but you want to kind of create hypotheses, build experiments, explore, learn from the research that you've done, synthesize that down into new hypotheses, prototype options, and then test, so that you kind of build this loop of discovering, differentiating, and iterating to get to really high quality design. So here's 4 methods that we use. They're pretty high level and abstract, but they'll give you a sense of what we typically do. We try to understand the context. It's really important to not just understand what's the product or feature or who's the user, but actually what are they doing? Where are they? When you think about what they need. Empathy, really important. It's easy to design for yourself because you know what you need, but it's really hard to design for others. And so developing empathy for them, especially if it's folks that are not like you. The use of analogs is one of my favorite things about our design process. So if you're stuck on a problem, sometimes it's solved out of category. So outside of crypto, outside of financial services, there may be analogous solutions to a problem around governance or around onboarding or whatever that you can port into and modify and apply in our context. And then finally, extremes. So we'll talk about this in a second, but if you think of the bell curve, the extreme ends of the bell curve are some of the most interesting parts. That's where the signal to noise ratio on needs is the highest. And so instead of designing for the middle of the bell curve where it might be like harder to discern what really matters, if you look to the extremes, you can really have clearer signal and act on that signal more quickly. So we'll give a few examples of each of these. So context. The most important thing here is to immerse yourself in the context. So if you're designing for a trader, like what does the trader's workstation look like? What does their day look like? Like what's their mindset in that context? And you wanna kind of really think through that so that you can design something that's really, really tailored to them. And that's where value is created. So we do something called in-context interviews to understand that. Here's some examples. I'll skip the Bank of America one, but a long time ago go back. Thanks. We did a project for Bank of America where we did something called Keep the Change. On the right actually is maybe even more interesting. We were working with cash in, cash out providers in India on a project that I was doing a few years back. And we went to go visit one of the cash in, cash out providers. And had we not gone to visit them, we wouldn't have noticed that there was a bank branch right across the street from this guy's store. and without that context, we wouldn't have been able to ask the questions of like, why do people come to your store versus going to the bank branch? And what we learned was like some important things about waiting in line, but also trust. The people that went to his store trusted him and didn't trust the bank, and therefore, that helped us design something better with that understanding. Next slide. Empathy. So try to put yourself in your user's shoes, have empathy for their experience in the world. And like we said, this is quite different than our own experience often. So it's like trying to be really, really observant of kind of like what new things that you notice, how you feel, surprises, and then changes that you might make. So on the next slide. One of the things we did in the early days of the collab, we started in 2015, and the very first day, we had a bunch of fellows, students, and we gave them that block in the top left, which was an origami block. And inside of it, it had a mission, which was basically it was a private key in the QR code for Bitcoin. And the mission was to figure out how to unlock, like to create a wallet and take that private key and put Bitcoin in your own wallet, and then use it to spend dinner, to buy dinner for your team. And so that was like a fun kind of empathy exercise to try to really understand like, how is this being used? What are the tricks? Like, what are the pain points, et cetera, et cetera. And for those who are curious, Bitcoin was at $250 when we did this exercise. Analogous solutions. So how has this problem been solved before? Look outside your industry and think about where does this problem exist in the abstract, and how can you apply it to your context? So on the next slide, there's some like high level examples. This is a classic one at IDEO. There was a team that was doing research for an emergency room project, and they went to a NASCAR race, even though that's not NASCAR, that's F1, and watched the pit crew, because it was an analog to the emergency room crew that was moving quickly to try to solve to help somebody in an emergency situation. And one of the things that they learned from the pit crew was there's always one point of contact for the driver. He was only looking at one person who was giving information, and the same thing was true for the surgeon. So they transferred that over. And so in our context, I think financial services and crypto, like I was saying, there's people have been experimenting with decentralized governance and governance generally for a long time. Or what can we borrow from Web 2 fintech kind of onboarding experiences, or other experiences that we want to use to make our products simpler, more understandable, more fun to use. And then, like I said, signals at the extremes. Let's skip to the next slide. So we worked with a project called Value, which is in Colombia and Venezuela. And they were looking at they did research with people who only transacted in Bitcoins because the Bolivar is going through hyperinflation in Venezuela. And from that, you start to learn kind of weird, interesting behaviors that can then you can start to design around. So for example, they started to find that people were not only just sending money back home, but they were trying to figure out how to save money and create savings accounts. So they created the value dollar, like a synthetic dollar based on Bitcoin through that research. Okay, we're going to go quickly. This is the full toolkit. I'm not going to speak to every slide, but I just wanted to give you like a high level orientation to it. And then we'll do an AMA with all of the awesome designers on the team here. So next slide. So the first tool is user profiles. The idea here is you can start to create archetypes of a person, and you want to really get a sense of who they are. So how old are they? What's their what kind of attitudes towards crypto do they have? What are the key jobs that the user wants done? Where can you find them? Like where do they hang out? Like how do you reach them? And then what are the hypotheses to test around that person? So this is an example that we made for a previous project. And then on the next slide, you can see the template. So everything in red you can replace with your own information. Let's skip ahead to the next tool. Okay, so the next major tool is the user journey. So once you've got a user in mind that you're designing for, you want to think about not just like while they're in your app, but you're trying to think about what are they trying to accomplish? What are the steps before that? What are the steps during? What are the steps after? So on the next slide is an example of a user journey. So, you know, going from moment one, wallet top up, and then kind of translating, transferring Bitcoin to DAI, or we should put UST given that we're working with Terra now. The hero moment is like, what's the moment where the value really shows through and you're solving the problem for your user? And then moment 4 was yield seeking, moment 5, withdrawal. So you're trying to think of through the whole kind of journey from start to finish. And so here again, template, you can use it if you want. Everything in red you can replace with your own specific info. Next one, interview guide. So customer interviews, we could do a whole talk just on this, but I won't. The thing to know with customer interviews is never ask yes or no questions if possible, because what you're trying to do is get the person talking and get them to reveal information that you can design around. And so you don't want to just have them confirming assumptions that you already have. You want to start to like surface new things. So one of the rules of thumb that we use is 1, try to avoid yes or no questions. 2, we call it the 5 whys. So when somebody says something like, oh, I would never use that, you ask why, because that's really interesting, right? Like what's their perception of a feature? And then they could say like, oh, well, I'm not comfortable with like the privacy kind of considerations here. And then you ask again, why? And then like they dig one level deeper. It's like, well, I want to have a pseudonymous login or whatever, right? So you start to like understand the deeper motivations, and that allows you to design a really good solution to the problem. The other thing that a lot of folks do is they just jump right into like, hi, I'm Joe. And then you just jump into like, do you like this feature? And the thing, you have a much richer and higher quality conversation if you start to understand who you're talking to a little bit, get them comfortable, and then build a little bit of trust before you go into some of the questions that you have. On the data recording side, write down quotes, write down kind of like ideas that you have while they're talking, or things that surprise you while they're talking. On the next slide, can show you some tools. So before you talk to a user, you can record what are your 3 critical assumptions. And this, you see how to do that in this template so that you can start to test that. Here's a sample interview agenda. So set the context, 10 or 15. This is for like a 40-minute interview. You can modify this according to how long you want to talk to the person. Typically 30 minutes is probably the minimum that you can get a really valuable user interview. So set the context for quite some time, 15 minutes, walk through your prototype, share your prototype, capture feedback, and then you thank them and share next steps. And then we've got some specific, I won't read through all this, but we've got like specific questions and examples where you can take your critical assumptions and like turn it into an interview script. Flying through the tools here. Next one is data capture. So just kind of showing how we do it. You don't have to use it this way, but you know, for each interview person, if it was in person, we would be writing down on Post-its or in a notebook. Virtually, we do this in Google Slides with these kind of like fake Post-its. But here's some like 3 categories that we look for, just like general notes, anything interesting, surprising, quotes, gold mines where you're like, oh, this is like really hot. They're really interested in this. There's something that points to an opportunity that we can capture, or landmines. What do they hate? What are they finding challenging? What are some issues to design around? The landmines are just as valuable as the gold mines, actually. Surfacing something that like scares people away or that they really, really don't like is great, because then you can design around that and create real value. So we've got a bunch of those. Last, I think, set of tools. Oh, you can go next one. So once you've done a bunch of those, you start to kind of take all those post-its and then start clustering them around patterns. You're looking for patterns in terms of needs, patterns in terms of opportunities, etc. And then you can do a brainstorm to decide what you want to like move forward with. Next slide. So these are some instructions on synthesis. Yeah. And then you can vote to start to create the patterns. See those green dots. Next slide. And then you can, like, once you've got your clusters, you can kind of condense that into 3 insights or more, and then decide what you want to do with it. So let's stop there. Okay, Gav, maybe unshare screen and we'll take a big breath, answer any questions about the tools, about design, but also AMA, like you've got some like awesome designers here who have been working on the Terra ecosystem for a while, have been working in crypto for a while, and we're happy to answer any sort of questions you have about the design research process, designing in crypto, the hackathon, whatever is helpful. Don't be shy.
I have a question, please.
Yeah, what's up?
So the idea is to have 3 teams to join the incubator, right? The IDEO Colab incubator.
Well, no, we don't have a specific number of teams we're looking for. There's going to be prizes at the end of the hackathon, just for the hackathon. We are also going to try to create an incubator with Delphi Digital and Terra after this. Whoever wins the prizes doesn't necessarily, they're not correlated. We're just going to separate who has the coolest hack and prototypes at the end of the hackathon. And then from that, we're going to pick people and put them together on teams for the incubator after that.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Alan, it looks like you have a question. What happens if users ask for a faster horse? Can you elaborate a little bit more on the question?
Yeah, how much should you use your intuition over what users are asking for? You might want to give them a car and they're asking for a faster horse.
Yeah. So that's where things like the 5 whys really come in handy. You're trying to understand, like, why do you want a faster horse? And they say, well, I want to get to the next town over faster because I don't have much time, or because of, whatever it is. And then you can start to understand the core need instead of the solution. So you start with the kind of like first principles needs, and then you can design better solutions for those needs.
Can I add one thing to that? Because I think Alan was asking about how do you navigate between the data that you collect and your own intuition? And I think ultimately it's the designer's choice or decision to design something, to take something and put it into your kind of bank of things that you can synthesize, and then eventually you get to decide. It's you end up using your intuition to design rather than ultimately going hardcore by data. So one thing to keep in mind, and I will always remind myself and my students this, is to use the notion of informed intuition. So intuition alone is good, but imagine if you can have informed intuition based on what people say, and not just one person, but ideally at least 5 plus maybe 8, depending on how many people you're talking to.
Thanks, Bryn. John's asking, what are some projects that are solving a useful problem with better design? So I'm going to kick that to Ramon, Bryn, and Gav. Like, what are some of the projects that you've seen that have good design, and knowing, and maybe there's not many at this point?
I mean, I would start with seeing it slightly broader. Like, good design doesn't mean just it looks good, but it makes something more useful, right? And like a great example that is not crypto, but like I feel is like a really good example for great design is like Stripe. It's like smart design because it's minimal code to put into your project. It's very nicely documented, so it makes it easy to use forever who wants it to do. So like I think the thing is like really what is useful design really depends what you're learning about your user. Like how can you make their life easier, either through integrating it or like how they're using it day to day. Like there's like a big broad breadth of like what useful design could be. So like don't just see it as like a visual treatment, but like also just kind of like how can you make someone's life easier by using your solution or the thing you're designing.
You guys have been looking at a lot of kind of what's out there in the market as you do some of your projects. Are there any that stand out to you as well designed for any of the IDEO folks?
Actually, this is going to sound like a boost for this own ecosystem, but some of the stuff going on in Terra, I think is some of the best UX that we have in the space. Anchor and I mean, just the apps that are designed here, they share a common language and they're pretty easy to get around. I think some of the first generation things we've seen, like we're still in the first generation of crypto, or maybe the second generation of like crypto projects using, you know, your in browser like MetaMask and things like that, where it's pretty disjointed. But I think whatever this wave is right now that we're starting to get into, this ecosystem is actually taking a pretty unique approach towards solving some of the usability problems. And you've seen it, and you've seen it in some of the early products, but I think we're still getting in there. And also Argent's a pretty great wallet. And if you guys haven't tried that, like Argent's UX in terms of a hard problem is kind of nice. And actually Crypto Steel, if you guys haven't done like a Steel backup of a seed phrase or anything, there's something called the Crypto Steel capsule, which is one of the best designs I think in all of crypto for storing something, but it's just a brilliant solution to a really finicky problem.
I think in terms of what you constitute good design or better design, one of the things that is often overlooked is timelessness. And some things come through, you know, I think for someone who's been in design for 15 plus years, something that comes through quickly also tend to die really quickly as well. And I think what you want to aim for is the notion of sustainability of your brand and timelessness of your brand, rather than going for something that's trendy and flashy and then all of a sudden the bubble pops and it feels like, you know, 2000 all over again. So I would encourage you to kind of dig into the core of whatever your product is, whatever your need, the need that you're trying to solve for, and really anchor your product and also brand identity based on that.
Cool. Mike is asking, are there any public user metrics such as platform browser, screen resolutions in dApps and or Terra specifically? I don't know of any. I don't know if anybody else has heard of public user metrics.
Yeah, I was just curious, like as we're designing, so, you know, knowing that the Terra wallet only works in Chromium-based browsers, so that kind of gives us a targeted direction. And then just, you know, are people more often using it on wide screens, or since it's definitely much more international, are there other resolutions being used? Like, should we be targeting, you know, less worried about responsiveness, more worried about targeting specific resolutions?
Ramon, I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but that also might be a good question for the Terra team who might have actual data.
I mean, just one way to approach it is like, don't design it like just for like a 24-inch screen, right? It's like, just again, it's like be user-centered. Like from learning, a lot of people are using a 13-inch computer with maybe 2 windows open that already kind of like cuts it into a weird format too. So like, even like just because it's right now Chromium based, don't assume everybody uses it full screen, right? I think like that's just kind of like one way. So like just thinking about like what is something that probably works on a half screen 13-inch computer is probably like something just to, in that case, to kind of like look from a design lens. From a user lens, I think that where I also would have to refer more on like the Terra team to kind of like help us out, who's right now the growing area of like for our consumers are. But I assume, as with everything in crypto, it's a very global audience, right? And don't assume just that there is like just one user out there. So I think, again, it's like being open to those different things.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Gav, this looks like a question for you. How do you balance the need of security and privacy with UX? Can you even have both?
Secured as it's a great question, and the entire industry has been struggling with this question since its birth. And security is a moving bar. It's like there is no security is always it's something that is dependent upon the perception of whatever the value is that somebody is storing. And so the hurdles that one person will jump over to save $100,000 will be different than the hurdles another person will go over to save $500. Like, so this idea of security is always a very personal thing. But in terms of it's like there's trade-offs between how easy something is to use and how secure it is many times. And so you can have good UX and security, but you're almost guaranteed to be making some security trade-offs to improve the UX and make it easier to use. By definition, the easier it is to use, the faster it is to the interface. And like, that means keys are hot, things like that. And so the smoother something is to use, usually, the more risky it is in terms of things being accessible. That's where like multi-sig and things are great, because you can have speed as well as, some setup of security. But you usually have some matrix of trade-offs between your a really good UX and security. So really good question. And that's something to be determined based on, what you're helping people store. But yeah, I don't think it's one answer. I think it's many answers based on the nature of the product.
One counterintuitive thing is the easier and more clear your product is to use, and the more educated your user is, it reduces a different type of risk surface area, even if you do have hotkeys or things like that. So Argent Wallet's kind of trying to create that balance, because it's self-custodied, but they're trying to have a intuitive interface and a educated user. So I think there's something to that. Yeah,
and what's interesting there is, like, in order to sometimes create more secure setups where it's not just reliant on one person, there's some teaching that has to go on. I mean, we're in an industry of teaching people about what is coming down the pipeline. So whether it's the app you're creating or the security for the app you're creating, there's a lot of teaching in crypto for teaching people how to use it and engage with it, in a safe way. And a lot of those things are counterintuitive because you don't just go to a bank in crypto, and if something bad happens, then you get your, access restored or something like that. And as a result, those types of setups in terms of multiple people or, storing things on different devices, those are completely people don't encounter those, and unless they come into crypto. And so we are kind of the first, we're the boundary condition between what exists and what will exist. And that boundary condition is where really interesting challenges in the UX space happen.
Nice. Ramon, this one looks like it's a question for you. Severin's asking, do you use or know any tooling to translate user journeys into actual developer tickets, for example, on GitHub? I often feel that there's an informational gap of not properly specified dev stories. Or how do you see this part of the engineering process? So you're currently doing a little bit of this with the Mars team. Do you want to speak to what your process is for translating design into development?
Well, I think right now, just in our case, we started using Notions and just kind of separating it out into different tasks, right? As a user story journey often has so many different steps. So just even look at what are the individual moments that we're designing for, and then also kind of I think one thing there is also kind of to prioritize what are the crucial things. And I think often it's also as important to to then kind of like decide which are the things that we should not prioritize in the beginning. So like what I start to see is like just be quite ruthless, either using Trello or Notion or any kind of like project management system to kind of like at least break it down into individual tasks that are actually actionable, that you can take on in a couple of days or in a week, and like not having as like a full big chunk of work, right? A one full complete user journey that might be a good start to do that, but then start to kind of like cut it down into more actionable pieces, and that I feel something then you can actually put into tickets. And the other thing is actually like do it together with your engineering team, right? Is like actually sit together with them and like figure out what's actionable. Sometimes it's like what you think might be a one-day task might be just be an hour task, or the other way around. So I think like that's the other way to start to think about it. And then the other way I think is like actually start to look at where are similarities in the user journey so that you only have to build it once, right? For instance, like a transaction screen that might show up in various several ways. You only have to design once and then just adapt it. So I think like it's really just kind of like at the beginning, kind of like mapping out your product that you have and then start to kind of like prioritize. So what is necessary for V1 and like what's the minimum lovable prototype that you want to build that kind of like does what you want to have in there, but like also kind of like put aside the things that you don't want, that isn't as necessary in the beginning.
One quick follow-up, what role does Figma play in that process between, I know that we design in Figma, but how does that work when you translate over to the developers?
I mean, I think like tools like that are like, again, it's really establishing a relationship with your developer or engineer, right? It's like in the beginning, that might be a little bit of hiccup until you figured out a workflow. But it's like, I think like, for instance, like Figma is wonderful because like a dev can take out a lot of custom code, how the elements already look out, right? Or like, and I think it's like, that's kind of like where you have to kind of like create short feedback loops, like actually use comments to kind of like have conversation at the actual point in user interfaces or in code or wherever questions are, to kind of like establish a shared understanding of the problem and like then kind of like figuring out a solution together.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like comments in Figma as a way to align with devs and maybe create some of those tickets or whatever, or create that shared understanding is really, really valuable. Luis is asking, any thoughts, tips on doing design research in the crypto community space specifically? For example, good channels to reach potential test users, etc. Yeah, so Twitter's amazing for this, because as hopefully you know and have felt, this community is pretty engaged and willing to contribute and participate. So for this hackathon, if you wanted to use a research, like you can put it out both onto the Event Tornado platform that you're looking for a specific type of person or whatever who you'd like to speak to for a half hour. But we can also help you tweet that out and find people. But crypto Twitter is source number one. I think think about who are you targeting and where do they hang out? So it could be crypto Twitter, it could be Discord servers, or it could be like, what's an analogous community on Discord that you want to tap into and see if you can find people. Of course, respect whatever the community's kind of like vibe is, and don't spam or whatever. But those are great places to find people that are already involved in crypto. If you're looking for people that are outside of crypto that you're trying to bring in, then again, that principle of like, where do they hang out on the web and how can you find them is the best way to do it. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts.
Yeah, the idea of amplifying through Twitter, asking questions. Twitter is, I've found to be extremely responsive. Same with like, or a really good Discord community. or Telegram community, wherever the community hangs out, like whatever the watering hole is, if you pop in and you're authentically like trying to tap in, I found the communities to be amazingly responsive. And then just having like this community collectively, whoever's on this call and participating in this, amplify it so we can, because all the questions that you guys are likely asking are relevant to the other projects too, right? This is an ecosystem play. And so understanding some of these common questions, I think it's gonna be useful for everyone.
I think one thing just to push there is like overshare a little bit what you're working on, like make them excited in what's your project about, right? It's like we're all in this space together and we want to find out solution for this ecosystem and we can all learn from each other. So like go in there and be willing to share what excites you and like why you are excited and like what you want, what you hope to learn from others. Because I think like the willingness to show like that you're willing to share them, some of your learnings, is always more exciting for someone to participate in your research, right? It's like, it's always make sure that both also can get something out of it. Like, I think that's always the most exciting conversation coming out of like when both sides are kind of like coming in, hey, I think this is really interesting. That's why I would love to get feedback on it. Then people will chime in. And then I think the other thing is like also just as an important thing, if it doesn't resonate, like just go with it and like follow it. Like don't get defensive and like just listen to it, why people respond that way, right? There's often like some underlying things that actually then really can help us design something better, and it's not personal against you, right? So I think like exploring why it might not resonate or all of that through asking why is that, or like what makes you think like that, that's I think where you're really going to unlock some really interesting insights that can make your product better in the long run.
Actually, I want to like to piggyback on that one. The idea of like in crypto, one thing that like is rampant is like very strong belief systems and dogma around a particular thing or a network or something like that. And in the design space, it's like a neutrality, like your own credible neutrality to perceive other opinions and things like that for yourself are like superpowers here, because it's like it's a heavily polarized space, and so the ability to float between those poles and bring yourself back to center so that you can go explore a pole and come back allows you to pull on elements design wise from, you know, networks where they have something going on that's really functioning well, but it would be overlooked if you were just completely anchored over here. So that neutrality is something to like to bring into communities. I think it's a really great design tool.
Right, we've got about 7 minutes left. Any additional questions, whether it's about design, research, the hackathon, or if you just want to hear what some of these folks have what they have to say? Go ahead, Prin.
I have a small thing to say, and I think this is one of the ethos that we have at IDEO, but also at the Stanford D School as well, is to fail early and fail often. I think we underestimate the power of failures, right? And to design something so that it can be broken by your user is a very beautiful exercise, rather than trying to perfect something and trying to wait for your launch. And yeah, just be in the mindset of building and launching and building and launching and learning from your failures. And I think that's how it's like innovation in a nutshell. It's just express test cycle. And the faster you can do that, and then the more times you can do that. Yeah, it's just simple.
I'll just underscore that. Psychologically, when you do user research, you want to be validated and you want the person to tell you they love your thing. And actually that's not so valuable. The most valuable thing you can get is for the person to tell you why they don't like it or why it breaks. Somebody used to say at IDEO, like the purpose of a prototype is for it to be broken, right? Like that's its primary purpose is to break. And then when you find out where it breaks, you can make it stronger in wherever that broke, and iterate your way to something much better. So I think just to underscore what Prin's saying here, like psychologically, you want to validate your great idea, but actually you can believe in your great idea, but find out how you can make it better by breaking the prototype.
Yeah, and with that, I think one build too is like, don't be afraid to bring a prototype, a sketch or something into the conversation, right? It's like every meeting or research meeting or something where you actually bring a shitty designed UI in there and like just have something visually in front of them, it makes your life so much easier. And also just let them explain what they see. And if they misunderstand it, let them go for a couple of minutes to see where their head is going and what's it doing. There might be an even better idea there, or like a better way to do something. So it's like, again, it's like really kind of like give the people you talk to also enough space to just talk about like how they think about it. And like sometimes even like just waiting a little bit too long for someone to react to it, and like making it a little bit discomfortable to kind of like wait in that minute and like push them to actually jump in is also a nice way to just kind of like force them to engage with what you're showing them. But always try to bring something. It makes your life so much easier than just talking about something that's just in your head.
And also in terms of feedback on that something, it's like the prettier, the more finished and polished it is, sometimes the more people will reserve their comments. And so if you just like show up with, hand-drawn sketches of an interface, the person who's on the receiving end of that isn't going to like, they're going to know it didn't take you a lot of time. So they might be more willing to just provide really rough comments about like, don't like this, do like this. Whereas if they see that it took you days to build this interface or weeks, and now you're presenting it to them, they're going to know that it took you time, and they might be a little more reserved in their comments. So the fidelity of what you present from like low to high fidelity also will elicit responses in terms of your interviews. So just be aware of what you're presenting to and how someone will perceive that and what they'll be willing to share as a result.
Thanks, Gav. I see a last question from Severin, and then maybe Edgar can have a last word giving more info about the hackathon itself. Do we have predefined user archetypes for the crypto universe to share, the first coiner, the pro trader, the DeFi farmer, etc.? Or is this better defined on a per app case? So we don't have predefined user archetypes. I think part of the value of creating those is building your own mental model for who you think you're designing for. So in the templates that we'll share, and we'll give more details about where we'll put those on Event Tornado. We give a few high-level examples, but really, again, like I think the act of filling out the archetype and building your own mental model is where the value comes from. All right, well, thank you everybody for listening. Let's give Edgar a few minutes just to give you any more information about other sessions. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up tomorrow and also for the rest of the week.
Thank you, Joe, and a very good workshop. Thanks. So tomorrow is going to be a pretty busy day. So we're going to have 3 Zoom events tomorrow. So an M&A with Do Kwon from Terraform Labs. We have a workshop with Band Protocol, and we have a workshop with Delphi Labs about token economics. So it's going to be a bit busy, but it's going to be super interesting. And after that, we're kicking off our hackathon. Also a quick note that I sent all the team leads an email today asking you a few questions that how are you doing with the team information about your idea. So if you haven't answered that yet, please do. This will help us to know how we can support you during the event. But other than that, I hope everyone is ready. It's going to be a very exciting few days. And we are now setting up the mentors. So you will be hearing from me probably tomorrow, more about that.
Great, thanks, Edgar. And somebody's asking, will this Zoom and future Zooms be on YouTube? Edgar is going to post it somewhere. I'm not sure where.
YouTube. Yeah, I'm going to share the link very soon.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your attention. We're really excited to get our hands dirty with you this week on the hackathon. We'll all be mentors and be available to help and answer questions and things like that. So don't be shy about hitting us up on the chat or through all the different hackathon channels. All right. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.